Today we're going to talk about the amniotic egg, which is a feature of reproduction for both reptiles and birds. These amniotic eggs have a hard shell around them so that the animals can actually develop apart from being away from moisture. If you remember all of the egg laying that we've talked about before, like with the fish, with the salmon who travel upstream to lay their eggs, with the videos that you watched there, you probably saw the pictures of that where the fish are laying those eggs, but they're kind of covered in this jelly-like substance for some protection, but they're not super protected because predators could still come along and eat them. But that jelly-like substance just kind of tends to surround them and hold them all together. With an amniotic egg, this egg can actually be laid, and then it's going to provide some protection and provide a place for the creatures to develop outside of the mother's body. So again, this is for both reptiles and for birds. And I think that the different parts of the egg can be a little bit confusing. So that's why I wanted to make sure I went through it with you to try and help you see what the different functions of the different parts are. I have a diagram on the board. Once again, I'm not a fantastic artist, but hopefully the color coding will help you to understand what the different parts of this egg are and what their functions are. Okay, so we're going to start on the inside and we're going to work our way out. So this little black thing is supposed to be the embryo. I did give him an eye up there so you could tell that was supposed to be our developing creature. So here's the embryo. The embryo is enclosed in what's called the amnion, which is blue on my diagram here. The amnion is what is going to protect the embryo from drying out, and it does provide some cushioning for him as well. It's also filled with amniotic fluid that continually surrounds him. That may sound familiar to you when a human female has a baby. Her womb is filled with amniotic fluid as well. And so in a minute, I'm going to tell you what the differences are between when a mammal is pregnant and then when we have an egg like this. Okay, but that's what the amnion does, kind of protects the embryos, provides the home, basically, for the embryo to dwell in. Now, in order for an embryo to grow, it has to have food. And so what provides the food is the yolk sac and the yolk that's inside of it. So as you recall, if we're going to be building a creature, we've got to have all kinds of amino acids, we've got to have carbohydrates, we've got to have all sorts of stuff in order to allow this creature to grow. So that is the purpose of the yolk and the yolk sac. If you enjoy eating eggs, you've got the yolk and the white, and so the yolk is the part that is really, really rich as far as the flavor goes, and so that's where all the nutrients are for the embryo as well. Now, when something is going to be growing and developing, it needs nutrients, but it's also going to need oxygen, and it's also going to be producing waste as all these different chemical reactions are happening. And so that is what the allantois is for. The allantois provides for gas exchange, and it provides a place for all of the waste products from the embryo to collect. Okay, so you notice that both the yolk sac and the allantois are all kind of attached in here to the embryo. Now, what happens is as this embryo is developing its circulatory system, it starts to put blood vessels out into the yolk sac and down into the allantois as well. And you can see those in the drawing, but the author never really explained what that was. So that's what's actually happening there, is that those blood vessels are being put out there by the embryo, and I really should have probably attached them all together because they obviously would be, to allow the embryo to take in the nutrients and to take in the oxygen and to get rid of the waste. Okay, so that's what those lines are in the book. That's why the red lines are going into that other part. Then all of that is surrounded by the chorion. And the chorion allows for gas exchange between the outside and the inside. In fact, if you have ever eaten a hard-boiled egg and you see that really thin little membrane that's like after you peel it, sometimes you have that other little membrane that you have to peel off too, that's the chorion. So if the egg that you're eating would have had a developing chicken in it, then that would have been what allowed for the gas exchange there. And then I forgot to put on here, outside of the chorion, but between the chorion and the shell is where your albumin is. And the albumin is in a chicken egg. That's what the egg white would be. And so the albumin is very, very protein rich and can provide nutrients for the embryo if it requires them. It also holds water, and it also acts as a shock absorber. So holds water and then acts as a shock absorber in case the egg would get moved or bumped or dropped. Of course, if it gets dropped too hard, obviously it's going to break, but that will provide some cushioning and some protection as the egg gets jostled around. Then finally, outside of that, you're going to have your shell. And the shell is really an amazing creation by our God, because it keeps the water out, but it's porous enough to let the gases pass through, because obviously the creature's going to have oxygen in order to keep developing, but we don't want water and all sorts of other things to get in. Now, what can happen is that if the gases can get in, that means you could have microbes, you could have viruses, you could have bacteria get in as well. And so that is actually another purpose for the albumin, is the albumin actually also provides a defense mechanism and helps fight off any of those disease-causing organisms that would get in there and try to get at the embryo. So it provides protection for that. Now, in a mammal, because they are, remember we said they were viviparous, because they are viviparous, they're going to be developing not with an egg, but with a placenta. And so what happens is that the allantois and the yolk sac actually are kind of combined together, and then that's what goes to the placenta, and then the mom is going to provide the nutrients, the gas exchange. She's going to carry away the waste through the placenta for the embryo that she's carrying. And so these two things here in this egg would be combined into the placenta, and then obviously you're not going to have a shell. Okay, so that is the amniotic egg, and you're going to find that both in reptiles and in birds.